Welcome to this very special interview in The Wire. Today we are talking about the RTI Story, one of the most significant books to have come out in independent India. And as we all know that the RTI Story this book documents a long history of RTI campaign which was quite vibrant in the grassroots for more than 30 years. And today we have with us the author of the book, Aruna Roy, who shares her byline with the MKSS collective, the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan collective. Aruna Roy, as we all know, is one of the most important leaders in the RTI campaign. She was also a part of the National Advisory Committee, which was set up during the UPA times. She resigned in protest after a few years. And she was also a former IS officer who got disillusioned with the services and resigned in 1975. Over the last 40 years, she has been a very important part of various social movements across India, the most important being the MKSS, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which she led in the Udaipur district, Udaipur and Rajsamand districts of Rajasthan. Here she campaigned and she organized people around issues of minimum wage and land distribution. And this movement eventually transformed into the RTI movement, which finally culminated in the RTI Act 2005. She was an IS officer. She quit the services in 1975 and since then has been a part of various struggles which were led at the grassroots, which were in rural India. Welcome, ma'am. What motivated you to write this book?
Actually, the first thing is that I'm not the sole writer, I'm only the sutradar or the chronicler. Actually, I wanted to call it the chronicle because for various reasons the publisher didn't agree. Because I'm only the narrator who has collected a series of stories and put them together. The idea was that in the writing of history, normally the people who create the history, that's the people, get left out and you never hear their voices as they create the history. What you hear is the perspective of power as it sees or uses that set of experiences, or you see an interpretation of what the people did by theoreticians and academics. So we felt that the most important thing was to really hear their own voices, how they articulated the issue, how they framed the problem, how they resolved the problem, what were their debates, and how did it actually come to be that through this whole process, the struggle, the campaign and the movement, democracy came to be defined and participatory democracy became a reality for the duration of the campaign and actually gave a huge opening for India to take the path to participatory democracy, which means that you don't allow people there with no constraints. There are principles you lay down to which you adhere. There are platforms created specially to run them. There's intra accountability, and there's also some kind of broader definition like the constitution, which holds you together. So then how do you do it? So it's in a sense also detailing the mechanics of a campaign, but seen from a people's perspective. And so that's why, and in people, of course, as the campaign grew larger, grew from presence in workers to journalists and reporters and local academicians and theoreticians. Then it grew to larger political initiatives, theoreticians, academicians, journalists, courts, ex-members of the bench, the bar, and then finally at some point it felt as if a cross-section of India was represented in the campaign and together they made something happen.
Yes.
And what has been very good in the few launches that we have had so far is the coming together of some of us from various sectors has brought back that energy.
Yes, no, which was, I was thinking because I could read almost half the book, and what struck me was also that you've written it. Despite you being the main author of the book, you have written yourself as a third. It's a third person account. Aruna is mentioned as not I and as Aruna. So and even the launch of the book was very different from the other book launches that we have seen recently. It was launched in Byawar, which has been the center of RTI movement, and also in Jaipur and here in Delhi. in Gandhi Peace Foundation, which has been a kind of hub for many activists. So was it so what the intention of this kind of book launch? Can you talk a little bit about it? Because
sure.
it also became a gathering of all the activists and people who participated, supported the RTI movement over the last 30 years.
Yes, I would like to, because I think the first obligation that we as a workers and peasants organization have is to the people who constitute our name, the peasants and workers, and who contributed to the book. And we chose Biawar for the English version, though very few English speaking people exist in Biawar, because that's where the campaign was born. Today the municipality of Biawar, regardless of its political affiliations, and the people of Biawar have put up a memorial to RTI in the marketplace where we sat. So we are, at the back of us is Gandhi. On our side is Swami Kumaranand, the communist leader, who was a very prominent leader of Biawar. And we are there in the middle of the marketplace. So the town of Biawar has somehow felt that it has made the RTI available to the rest of India. It's owned the RTI, and actually they say, we want to be known as the RTI city rather than as the city of Tilpatti, which is a sweet they make.
Yes.
So we felt the English book should be released. The Hindi one will be released in Bhim, which is even more grassroots, where the MKSS was born. Apart from that, the interesting, humorous anecdote. Vipul Mudgal, a journalist friend to whom we sent all the photos, and he quipped back that I've heard of book releases with cocktails. This is the first time I'm listening of a book release with a dharna. Because we brought back the color and songs of the dharna and the Gotala Rath Yatra and everything, in a sense to celebrate with people.
No, and what is very very noticeable in the book, that this is one of the RTI Act, as we know, many people believe that it's the single most important act for greater transparency in the government, and it has been used also in the Gandhi Peace Foundation launch. Shankar Singh, one of the MKSS founders, he also talked about how, in contrast to Nepal and Bangladesh, India has
Shekhar Singh.
Shekhar Singh.
Yes.
So, in contrast to Nepal and Bangladesh, India has almost between 4 to 6 million RTI applications every year. So, that means it's a huge success, but it started long back as a small movement of minimum wage and land struggles. So, could you talk about those movements and how it have transformed into a greater national movement for right to information?
Yes, I could.
It's a long question, but
I'll try and be very brief.
Yes.
See, the first real struggle was for minimum wages. Before that, we had already had a land struggle. The land struggle began actually when some of the people who were in a particular small village, a revenue village, not in the panchayat, entire panchayat, but a revenue village, who came to us saying that we have a landlord who was the Thakur of the entire place, who is also now occupying the panchayat, who used to own enormous quantities of land. And so under the Sealing Act, it was taken over by government. His father actually burnt the Indian flag.
Yes, Hari Singh.
Hari Singh's father.
Yes.
So that notorious family, just like Sholay, the character, the man who was the hero of Sholay, terror in the local area, he beat up women. And if you grazed cows on his land, this is 1987 I'm talking to you about.
Yes.
You grazed cows on his land, you had to give him a certain quantity of the ghee you got from that milk. If you took mud out of his khet, which was his khet at one time, which is now government land, for construction or building, you had to dump certain amount in the Ravla. I'd never imagined that such a thing would exist. And so when the people organized against it, it was very, very cruel to them. So they organized, and that was the first major battle. And we found that information played a vital role, because Hari Singh accessed the numbers of the plots that these people were asking for as social forestry. And he made sure that those numbers were not there in that distribution meeting which the government held to distribute land. So if it was not notified, you couldn't give it. That made us understand that there's the use of power and the misuse of power for information. And information is power. So that we gleaned from there. So these things which came to us, In the minimum wage struggle, which we had 2 hunger strikes also for, we realized that they always told us we lied. And we had to say we have worked for 8 hours, you guaranteed us an 8-hour wage, they've been there. And we produced the work, pay us. So all the corruption went underground and we were made as if we had never performed anything, that we were sucking the resources of the state and so on, called all kinds of names and abused roundly. So we asked for the muster roll. They wouldn't show us the muster rolls. And there have been hilarious stories. Shankar, Nikhil and I have run behind a mate who actually keeps the muster rolls quite a long distance because he was running, and we thought we'd catch him and get the muster roll. And they would sometimes say, and when we met him the next day or a few days later, we said, what's happened to the muster roll? He said, the cows ate it up. So it can be as absurd as that.
Yes.
But the point is, it's a vital document. So that's what proves your truth. So slowly through all these processes, it was our colleague and comrade Mohan Ba, Mohan Ji as I used to call him, a Dalit person, who said that it is important, articulated clearly in front of his own people, that those records have to come out.
Yes.
And we also felt that that's how it grew.
Yeah, in fact, there are multiple stories in the book which documents these kind of how muster rolls were being fudged. In fact, you narrate a story where one of the persons came up to NKSS and talked about how the laborers were being paid rupees 11, and the records showed that they were being paid rupees 22 at that point of time, and there was a huge dharna and a movement that kind of forced the government to acknowledge such discrepancies at the grassroots. So, but that is what exactly in North India, Rajasthan, apart from various other things, is also known to be one of the most caste-ridden societies, also very feudal societies. How did MKSS kind of emerge? How did you, Nikhil, and Shankar Singh think of founding MKSS or running the campaign from Rajasthan, where the kind of adversities you may be facing would have been much more greater than probably other states?
See, actually, it was quite an accident that I went to Rajasthan after I resigned from the IAS.
Yeah, you were working with SWS.
I went to work in Rajmer district because there was a project there which my husband was working, and I went and thought I'd join there. I worked 9 years there, and I learned all about the various politics of people and the politics of local elections, the politics, completely new history for me. But I grew in a different way with that experience. I felt that people's politics was critical, and that it was the control over democratic institutions that was the key to people's power. So we left in Shankar, and I was also there, but Nikhil was not there. He was a student. So we met and we decided to work, and we decided to live and work from Shankar's village. So his sister had a hut, a mud hut, which she was willing to give us on no rent but free.
Jayat Singh
and Hagu. We moved in there. But for me, there was already a system of intervention that was very clear, and I kind of knew the issues people raised, but we didn't impose it on them. At that point, there was a huge famine. The worst kind of drought Rajasthan has seen in many years. So we defined drought in many ways. Drought which is only without grain, drought which is only without water, drought without grain and water but fodder. But this was what is called Chappaniyo Akal, which meant that you had neither fodder, nor water, nor grain. It was very dire. So at that time, the demand for work, the demand for water was less. The demand for work and employment took top position. And so through that, we understood when we formed, and then Swarngad happened, then the minimum wage battle happened, and so we grew into asking for an organization. And in a sense, even today, Rajasthan does have democratic spaces which we can push. So, and though it's feudal, and it is no more or less caste in Bihar than Bihar or UP or any other place. And it gave some space because of political illiteracy for this action to take place, and we did. And now, but we also linked. Every battle we won linked the specific to the larger issues. So, for instance, when minimum wages were not paid, we went right up to the Ministry of Rural Development. So, finally, in that second hunger strike, MORD stopped 100 crore installment to government of Rajasthan of the JR, under the JRY,
Under
the Jawahar Rozgar Yojana at that time. So it made splashes. I remember Usha Rai writing about it in front page of the Times of India.
Times of
it
India
came out.
broke the story at that point of time. Yes.
And there was an edit. So in that sort of sense, we linked up to larger politics. And so there was always a relationship between Parliament and Panchayat, which kind of went through the assembly. We knew money was being refused by government of Rajasthan. They were saying that, telling us that there is no money and returning money to the Planning Commission or the Government of India, unspent balance. So we linked up. So food battles, everything we linked up. And we realized that political maturity will only come when we realize, sitting there in that village, that I am casting a vote to Parliament and I am casting a vote for the Legislative Assembly, and also casting a vote for the Panchayat President. But I have to understand that there is a link in all this, and we must make them accountable. So the slogan of the vote being responsible, that the vote being accountable, that the vote being not just merely a vote, that I am transferring my right to govern myself for a period of time to an individual. Sovereignty is still mine, but I share that sovereignty with a representative. That representative must give his answers to me. Sawal hai, jawab do, jawab do. These kinds of things come into, and so that forced a kind of political interface.
So yeah, again, coming back to the mechanics of it and how the movement, because the book kind of reveals how a movement grows organically in phase, because around the point you and your team at MKSS were kind of leading this MK minimum wage and land struggle, the panchayat body, they were very top level policy changes were also happening around that point of time. Panchayat local body elections were introduced, and then around 1991 when the minimum wage and land struggles kind of grew into a larger RTI struggle. So around that point of time, liberalization happened, and MKSS movement, this kind of documents, it had to grapple with these questions, and one chapter you have devoted to how you thought of opening a kirana store, a grocery store, in which traders who were earlier kind of supporting some of the land and minimum wage struggles suddenly became opposed to.
No, they never did actually.
They never did?
No.
Okay, yes. No, because I somehow got an impression that the residents of Bhim and some shopkeepers kind of thought that, okay, minimum wage.
No, never.
They never did.
See, it was very funny. In all of India, the village and the Kasbah town have different politics.
Yes.
Now, I don't know, in today's saffronized India, it's maybe different, but usually, but even then the economic issues are very different because the people ask for a share and the town is very nervous of sharing economic fruits and benefits. So there was always a tension and they didn't like the MKSS. But what happened in the terms of the RTI was that they had to reluctantly accept that it was good for them as well. But in this establishment of the shops, you won't believe it, we have 5 kirana dukans which were crowd-funded, 10 rupees by farmers and 100 rupees by salaried workers on loan for 2 years, returned to them. Seed capital grew out of sales. We get only 1% net profit, but those 5 shops now, each shop has a turnover of 1 crore every year. So this 5 crores actually with people's management. Again, the whole thing was information and people's management. Information because they never let on at what price they bought the wholesale price of items. And the local trade, it's a 25 to 30% net profit markup. Ours was 1% net profit markup. So we dragged all the customers there. The second thing was that they are never open about their. Some of the things are expensive if you want quality. So we say, this is the wholesale price, this is the price, want to buy it, it's there, it's your shop. They tried to come and bring down the shops because once after Ayodhya they called that strike, they came and they wanted to burn and loot the shop. So we stood aside and we said, okay, come in today. We are not going to shut the shop, but you can burn us today. We have 2,500 people who finance the shop. They'll come tomorrow, then face the IR.
But this idea of people run grocery shops, how did you think will kind of intervene into the larger debate of economic liberalization? Should it happen or should it not?
It shows.
At the ground level, how did you think that it would be an intervening factor?
It did 2-3 things. First of all, it showed that it's not a free market.
Yes.
It blew the notion of a free market. It's a controlled market. The prices are controlled, the quality is controlled, everything is controlled by a group of people who then call the shots. They hoard, they do many things. So now the markets where these shops are located have to take into consideration the presence of this shop. So their whole economic balance is controlled to some degree by the presence of the shop and the MKSS. Politically, this shop pushed us into the politics of the Kasbah town as important players. Otherwise, we are in the hinterland, and they couldn't care less. But it pushed us into the main debate of very many things. So we had bargaining power with the panchayat, with MLAs, with everybody, because the shop became a part of the economic scene of the town. It gave us a platform to take the politics of progressive India into that place. So they, as I said about the shop earlier, they're always in two minds, because a cheap good shop is always an attraction, and yet at the same time we use the shop for talking about constitutional rights, talking about fundamental rights, talking about various things, talking about transparency. There's a kind of an uneasy truce, but it exists. So it gives you space for dialogue, which is so critical, because without dialogue there is no democracy. So it gives us that space. So when we go there, they always say, you are like this, you say the streets of Bhim belong to you, the shops of Bhim belong to you. So we said, in a sense, everything belongs to the people of this country, but it doesn't mean we're going to grab it from you. But you have an obligation and an accountability to tell us exactly what you are doing. So it begins a debate, and that debate is continued over the last so many years. So that it is given space for. And of course, even interacting with the shop gives some political content to people.
So even an initiative like that, the message that your collective was kind of taking forward was "Hamara paisa, hamara hisab." So with the government, it became kind of a bargaining tool. This shop also, but your book is throughout laced with stories of people who were barely literate, but highly educated in the sense that they could articulate the sense of what is their right, and there was a vibrant feeling that the idea of a citizenship, which in many places we do not hear of much, and it became kind of it deepened the democracy, the movement itself before the RTI came. So the movement itself deepened that kind of democracy in which people had a feeling that they are citizens and they have their rights. So it must have been a great learning experience for you also, I think.
It's always exciting. And let me tell you a very small example. There was these literacy campaigns, and collectors used to declare district after district literate. So we had gone in Ajmer district in a place called Javaja, and we saw a caption on the wall which said, they used to write, "Is jile ki kya pehchan? Padha likha har insan." Somebody rubbed out the padha likha har insan, and it said, "Is jile ki kya pehchan? Upar chaddi, niche banyan." So we were laughing. We said, "What does it mean?" They said, "Everything stops each other. Where are the literates? You are pushing us adults into classes. Our schools, and they padlocked the school. No teachers in the school. What kind of irony is this? Our children want to go to school, and you don't give us teachers. We are hard pressed for time, and you push us into these night classes, which actually never happened." So what are all these false things? So the questioning of falsehood, not only in terms of money, but in terms of accountability, in terms of services, in terms of falsehood stated. So that whole irony kept coming up in so many statements made during the campaign. People are very intelligent. So one of my friends, Northi, who's quoted a little bit, not too much in this book, but who's been my guru in many ways. Northi was elected Sarpanch of her village panchayat in Harmada in Ajmer district. Excellent Sarpanch. She's computer literate. But now the government has decreed that without an 8th class certificate, you can't become a Sarpanch. She's debarred. She fought in the High Court, lost. We are now in the Supreme Court. So the point is, if we do not understand that wisdom and intelligence are beyond literacy, And those who are literate are in fact ignorant. You ask anyone who's Mahatma Gandhi, they don't know in our villages. If you ask somebody the relationship between the Nehru family and the Gandhi family, because they've adopted the word Gandhi, the surname Gandhi, they do not know. You ask them about any history which is 30 years old, our students don't know. They don't have no general knowledge, they have no clarity even in the subjects prescribed for them.
Yes.
But just because there is a certificate, we are saying they are literate and therefore more intelligent. Intelligence doesn't have anything to do with
that
literacy.
is what the book also focuses on a little bit on the cultural campaigns that the movement had, and where people were coming up with their own witty slogans, intelligent poetry, and satire, different kind of satire. Could you talk a little bit about how cultural campaigns as a vehicle to push forward this idea of greater transparency worked, and what was its kind of merit in it?
Actually, without theatre, drama and song, this campaign would not have got on. For instance, when we had our first protest, then Shankar produced with all his colleagues all these marvelous songs. So in these songs, there are interactive songs. So you catch hold of a traditional tune, but you put in new words and you sing. People are familiar with the tune, so they sing with you. It's in the local language. You start, First one was about talking. Bol satidare. That is, if you don't articulate, you have lost your battle. So we started with that, and then it slowly began with Sushila going and speaking in Delhi about Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab. When she was asked by a journalist, she said, if I send my son with 10 rupees to the marketplace, I ask for accounts. What do you mean I can't do anything about it? It's our money, it's our accounts. Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab. Then Mohanji was a bard, writer, illiterate. One of the biggest Kabir Bhajanchis with a repertoire of 400 Kabir songs was illiterate. So he was called Bhagatji by everybody.
Yes.
Now he composed many songs, and one which went viral was when he said, the name of the song was, he began with saying, Pehle wale chor to ye karta tha, abbe wale chor to ye karta hai. Like that it went on. And he said, Pehle wale chor to बंदूक से मारता था, आज का चोर तो कलम से मारता है राज चोरों का. Now that couplet made it clear that records had to come out. So that went viral. Then Shankar did Maine Manga, which became viral again. Sona Chandi Maine Manga. So the audience said Maine Manga. And slowly it came down to सूचना मांगते हैं, हम कागज मांगते हैं, Vestrol bill voucher मांगते हैं. क्यों मांगते हैं? And of course he inserted Pepsi Cola, हमने मांगा, beer हमने मांगे, all that. So it was much lively interaction. Then Chori Vado Gano Ho Gyo Re, which was on the basis of a women's song about Krishna. Kanuda Makhan Mangyo Re, Koi To Munde Bolo, that was converted to Chori Vado Gano Ho Gyo Re, which was very powerful and which the administration really hated. Because every time we sang the song, they were up in arms against the Sarpanches, hated the song, but it was a popular song. Yeah. One of the CMs of Rajasthan is to keep all these songs in his pen drive, because though he was CM and may have objected to it politically, they were so lively, these songs, that they just brought in earthiness, humor, intelligence, and help politics.
Help people relate to the idea.
And they relate to it.
Yes.
So that was very, very important to the campaign. That's why in Jaipur, when we had the launch, the Hela party came, the traditional singers, and they composed political songs. Contemporary songs. So the lyrics are all contemporary. They came to Jaipur and they sang. So there are more than 35 people who come with a big nopat, that's a drum, and they sing. So we pushed and pulled people into the scene. And they went back not only with a song written and performed, but with a concept of information back to their villages. So that's how the whole spread took place culturally.
So one of the biggest challenges of social movements is to convert the issues into a political issue. RTI, the Right to Information movement, was one of the few successful social movements which got converted into a political issue, culminating in an RTI Act in 2005. How could you elaborate on this aspect? Because many social movements have struggled to make it a political issue, and here you have talked about how RTI movement kind of engaged with different elections and engaged with mainstream politics also to make it kind of more inclusive. So and in the sense demand and make these information issues more popular.
Oh, for one thing, we always liaised and worked with theoreticians, academics, researchers. So that's why Upendra Bakshi, that's why V.S. Vyas in IDS, that's why, all the various people. We also worked with very senior and committed bureaucrats, S.R. Shankaran, who was a legend in the IAS,
Yes.
and many other officers who supported these issues. And at the state government level, many officers like Bajrang Lal and so many others who supported the idea of transparency. We also liaised with people who were drafters of law, who were legal experts. So a whole range of people who were concerned with legal instruments also got involved in it. We also researched with lawyers collectives, with journalists, with doctors, with professional groups. We didn't leave them out of the net. We took them and the issue to them and said it's important to you as well. So when the campaign grew, there were people ready to draft a law, people ready to read and give feedback from all points of view, researchers with theirs, and the peasants and workers who knew exactly what were the non-negotiables. They couldn't look at the written clause, but they knew penalty had to be there because of their experience in Janavat. They knew that transparency meant that you didn't have to have literacy. All that you wanted were the records so that somebody literate could read them. All these things got defined because of the multiplicity, and the women with their issues. They said, if we have to get a doctor's report after rape, we need this following stuff. So everybody put their bits and pieces into it. So when the law was drafted, it kind of made it a universal right, not only in its origin, but in the shaping of it, so that it became a good tool. In fact, our RTI law is considered one of the best.
Holistic kind of thing, got all the perspectives.
It was a democratic campaign in other senses to bring, and of course you've got, but the thing is, you've got to involve people. That was what was wrong with the Lokpal drafting. The Lokpal did not involve people, and you just said if X has seen it, I've seen it.
Yes.
You can't treat a law like that. On the one hand, we are saying it's a social contract. On the one hand, we are saying you're responsible for it, and then you can't bring in the my bap attitude to say ki, he has made it, so you have to read it, you have to understand what's in it. That's how you grow politically, people grow politically to manage democracy.
So so now finally I would like to kind of, ever since the RTI Act was passed in 2005, the UPA government since then has been kind of developed some sort of cold feet. Various amendments were pushed through the RTI Act, and now since 2014, when we have a new government at the center, there are increased instances of attack on RTI activists, and the Official Secrets Act is being used tremendously to hold back information. So in this kind of a sustained attack on one of the on the RTI Act and also the RTI activists, how do you think, what could be the strategy, and how do you analyze the situation? Do you agree or not?
You see, I think even in the beginning, there was a committed part of the Congress with Mrs. Gandhi at the head, committed to the RTI. Within the Congress itself, there were people who didn't quite want it.
Yes.
So we had to fight for the penalty provision, even with the Prime Minister, when we said to him that if you don't give the penalty provision, keep the law. We went in a big delegation and said that to him. We had to get 154 amendments to the law that the Cabinet sent into Parliament at the Standing Committee and Selection Committee processes. So in a sense, we had to manage the law process, legal process. But on the other side, nobody really wants to share power. And actually, there's a Socratic dialogue in which there's an argument that power is never shared. And therefore, people who are powerful will make laws that give justice only to themselves and not to the poor. But in this case, the inverse happened. Actually, it's a very interesting theory to see how that happened. Because the people with power said, we will share it. Unheard of. Now, how did the Parliament pass it? But it did pass it. Now, having passed it, it was also the international scene, because at that time, everyone was talking about Freedom of Information Act and Access to Information Act, not Right to Information Act. India already had access, so we wanted right to information. So in that process, we got it. Cold feet happened immediately because first amendment 6 months after. So in a sense, everyone has wanted to amend the law. The political parties to be make their accounts transparent has gone into limbo. The present government has taken it a step further, electoral bonds, and now foreign funding. need not be transparent at all. So what we need to do is to divide and see it in three aspects. One is people's participation. 6 to 8 million people still using the law, fighting for it, despite the killings, still fighting for it. That level of commitment no other law in this country has seen. But with the management of it, which is the mechanics of it, the implementation of it, the PIOs and commissions, government is infiltrating and controlling and really making a mess, and we have to fight it. At the third level, the political thing of the notion of sharing sovereignty with the representatives. The notion of participation has been shot down. Politically, the planning commission, which used to tell us 5 years of plans, now the Niti Aayog says nothing. There's something put on the internet. What it puts on, we can't verify. We don't know what its records are. At every level, institutions of democracy, which were supposed to were designed for people's participation, are now denying participation. So at that level, we have not raised enough voices. We have not raised enough voices about the second generation laws not being passed in Parliament, the Whistleblowers Act, the Grievance Redress Act, the Lokpal Bill are still lying. Even the Judicial Accountability Bill.
Is the Modi government open for dialogues?
I don't think so. Because I really don't think they're open for dialogue. And it's in the body language, political body language of the government. It's also in the fact that you think that by a Prime Minister having a Man Ki Baat, he will be able to listen to 1.2 billion people. It's physically impossible. Unless we decentralize the process of listening and settling disputes. Unless we have multiple platforms and multiple agencies, democracy can't function.
I think we'll stop at that. So despite high talk of decentralization, we heard that how Modi government has been not open to dialogues. In that sense, the RTI campaign spanning over 30 years still continues despite having an act in place. So many acts like the Whistleblowers Act, the Jan Lokpal Bill, despite various promises, have not been passed. So the idea that has come across after reading the book and after talking to Aruna Roy is that there is greater need for transparency and there should be a vibrant civil society movement taking up this issue. Thank you for watching The Wire. We hope you enjoyed it.